As I drove away, it took all the willpower I could muster to stop myself from turning around and returning home so I could confront Katie about Munson, her infidelity and her lying. I desperately wanted this whole horrible nightmare to be over. I managed to restrain myself. Gradually my anger abated. By the time I arrived at the Jupiter construction office, my emotions were once again back under control. When I reached the sanctuary of my office, I sat down in my chair, closed my eyes and exhaled. For Dana's sake, I had to be strong. In order to be certain that her husband would get nothing in a divorce settlement, she needed the evidence we were going to get Wednesday night. Until then, I had to maintain control of my emotions. I couldn't do anything that might alert either Munson or Katie. I took a few minutes to pull myself together, and then I went to work. I had a full day ahead of me. I needed to get started. I was just opening the files on the first of the 3 projects I was involved with when my telephone rang. I picked it up. Your wife on line to Frankie. It was Janine, the office receptionist. Thanks, Janine. I pushed line 2. Hello, Katie. Frankie, please forgive me. I lost my temper and I didn't mean any of those things I said. I guess I'm just frustrated by my job. And I'm a little tired too. You're not a stick in the mud. You really aren't. It's okay, Katie. It wasn't okay. The woman I loved was screwing another man, but I had to maintain the facade that everything was fine. I mollified her. Lately I've also been tired. I think we're both a little on edge. Frankie, that's so true. Thank you for understanding. I could hear the relief in Katie's voice. Are you still planning to have dinner with Andrea tonight? There was a moment of silence and then Katie said, Frankie, I'm sorry. She's been a little depressed lately. I think it really would be better if I didn't change our plans right now. I see. All right, Katie. If you think it's that important, then I guess you'd better go ahead and go out with her tonight. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you so much for understanding. You really are a wonderful husband. There was another pause. After a second or two, Katie giggled and said, Frankie, yes, get some sleep while you're in Kansas City. Why? Because when you get back Thursday night, I intend to wear you out. I laughed. That's a pretty enticing offer. It's not an offer. It's a promise. And Frankie, yes, I plan to have a special surprise for you on Thursday night, just to show you how much I love you. What is it? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? I guess not. I was chuckling. Katie was having an affair with Pete Munson, and she was lying to me about it. But she was both my friend and my true love. It was hard not to enjoy talking to her. Frankie, I know I haven't been myself lately, and I don't think I've been a very good wife for the past few weeks. I listened. When you get back from Kansas City, I'm going to try to be better. I really am. I think we can both do a better job of taking care of each other. Well, I promise that I'm going to try to do a better job of taking care of you. I was silent. I wasn't quite sure how I should respond to that. After a moment, Katie asked, Frankie, are we okay? Yeah, Katie, we are. It was a lie. I felt bad saying it, but she was lying to me, too. It's funny. Deceit seems to breed deceit. I'd better get back to work. I love you, Frankie. I love you, to Katie. And despite everything that was happening, I knew that I was still telling her the truth. Bye, Frankie. Bye, Katie. After hanging up the telephone, I sat back in my chair and sighed. Regardless of what was happening, I knew that I still loved Katie. I was also certain that she still loved me. Even so, it was fortunate that I was going to California. I had to have some time away from her. She'd hurt me and I needed a chance to heal. I knew that eventually I would heal, and when I did, I hoped that Katie and I would, in some way, be able to be friends again. I could have easily spent the entire morning thinking about my relationship with Katie, but that wasn't an option. In 2 days I was leaving for San Francisco. I had obligations that needed to be addressed. Focusing my attention, I went to work. At noon I put everything aside. It was time to leave for my meeting with the lawyers. I wasn't yet finished cleaning up the projects I was working on for Jupiter Construction. Actually, I wasn't even close, but it didn't matter. Katie was going to be spending the night with Munson. I knew I could come back to my office and devote the entire evening to my projects. After stopping for a quick ham and cheese on rye, I drove downtown and parked in the ramp adjacent to the Monarch Life Insurance building. Inside the marble foyer, I read the building directory. The office of Bennett, Holloway and Finch was on the 27th floor. I rode the elevator up. The office was plush, oak paneling and rich wool carpeting. Seconds after introducing myself to the receptionist, a middle-aged man wearing a dark gray business suit appeared. He extended his hand. Mr. Reese, I'm Herm Bennett. Won't you please come into my office? I followed him. His office was every bit as plush as the reception area. As I was sitting down in one of the 2 leather armchairs in front of Mr. Bennett's desk, I glanced at the oil paintings on the walls. They all appeared to be originals. I suspected that they were valuable. As soon as I was settled, Mr. Bennett said, Mr. Reese, Arthur has filled me in on the key details of this situation. If everything goes according to plan tomorrow night, I'm certain you will be in an excellent position to dictate the terms of your divorce. You'll be able to leave your wife homeless and destitute. I looked at Mr. Bennet. I don't understand. This is a no-fault divorce state. Why wouldn't there be 50-50th split of our assets? You are correct. This is a no-fault divorce state. But the law states that assets should be divided in an equitable fashion. That doesn't necessarily mean 50-50ths. You and your wife have been married for just a little bit more than a year. By the time you met your wife, you had already completed your education and were well established in your profession. You also don't have any children. Considering the short duration of your marriage, the court is going to be very amenable to the idea that your settlement should reflect what you each originally brought to the marriage. He smiled. The fact that we have evidence that your wife was actively cheating on you with another man will strengthen your case. Mr. Bennet, I don't have any desire to leave my wife homeless and destitute. I'm sorry, Arthur led me to believe that. Mr. Kendall is angry with his son-in-law, and he has good reasons to feel that way. Pete Munson has been a cold-hearted, self-centered husband for his daughter. It's clear that he feels absolutely no emotional attachment to her. On the other hand, until recently my wife and I had a strong, loving relationship. I believe that Katie still loves me, and I know that I still love her. Mr. Reese, are you certain that you want to terminate your marriage? Maybe you should try counseling. Shaking my head, I quietly said, I've thought about that. I don't think I can do it. My wife has hurt me with this affair. I don't trust her anymore. I paused. After a moment I said, Mr. Bennet, I don't have any desire to destroy Katie or hurt her in any way. She's an adult and free to make her own choices. If she wants to have relationship with other men, that's a choice she gets to make. But if she's going to do that, I don't have to stay married to her. That's a choice I get to make. All right, Mr. Reese, I think I understand you. So what kind of a settlement do you want from this divorce? I want Katie to be financially secure. As far as I'm concerned, she can have everything if she wants it. But when this divorce is final, I want it to be final. I don't want to have to pay any spousal maintenance or alimony or anything else like that. Mr. Bennet, I'm a structural engineer. I'm paid very generously for my services. Making money is not a problem for me. I just want to end the marriage with a minimum of arguing, haggling and acrimony, and when it's ended, I want it to be ended. I understand. I think we can do that. Mr. Bennet paused for a moment and then he said, a 3-month separation is normally required before a divorce becomes final. If that's a problem for you, we can probably expedite it a little. Your wife's blatant infidelity can be used as a compelling reason to end the marriage as soon as possible. That won't be necessary. I'm not involved with another woman. There aren't any child custody issues, and I'm going to be spending several months in California. As long as this doesn't turn into a circus, a 3-month waiting period isn't a problem for me. We're planning to serve Mr. Munson tomorrow night at your house. Do you want us to serve your wife at the same time? Yes. Very well. Mr. Bennet stood up. Unless you have something else you wish to discuss, I believe that I now have a reasonably good understanding of what you want us to do for you. I stood up. Yes, I think we've covered everything. Mr. Bennet walked around his desk. Mr. Reese, I'm going to take you to one of our conference rooms. My secretary will join you there. We have some forms we need you to sign so we can get all of this started. I followed Mr. Bennet to a conference room. After shaking my hand and expressing his sympathy about the situation, he left. A moment later, an attractive middle-aged woman entered the room. She was carrying a manila file folder. Mr. Reese, I'm Judith Barnes, Mr. Bennet's secretary. I'm very sorry to hear about your impending divorce. I nodded. She smiled. It was a warm, comforting smile. I have some forms that you need to sign. Motioning towards 2 chairs on the near side of the conference table, she said, let's sit here. This shouldn't take long. It didn't. 30 minutes later, I was driving out of the parking garage adjacent to the Monarch Life Insurance building. It was almost 2:30. I spent the rest of the afternoon visiting my investment counselor and the 2 banks where I had savings accounts, checking accounts and certificates of deposit. I wasn't concerned about Katie getting my money. I was willing to give it all to her. My worry was that Munson would persuade Katie to withdraw the money and give it to him. I didn't want that slimy bastard to get 1 dime of our savings. I left Katie with a checking account that had a balance of $2,500 and a Visa card with a limit of $1,500. I kept my name on both the checking account and the credit card. I planned to make sure that there was always $2,500 in the checking account, and I would pay the monthly credit card bill myself. I still loved Katie and I didn't ever want her to be destitute. I'm sure that there are people who would consider me a wimp and a sucker for doing that. Those people would most likely urge me to try to exact as much revenge on my wife as I possibly could. I think those people are wrong. Katie made a choice. It was a choice that hurt me, but it was a choice that she gets to make. I now had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life as a bitter man, consumed by anger and resentment, or I could forgive her and try to move on with my life. I was choosing to move on. As I was leaving the second bank, my cell phone rang. It was Katie. I answered it. "Hi, Frankie. Where are you? You're not in your office." "No, I'm out taking care of a few details before I have to leave for Kansas City in the morning." "What time does your plane leave?" 8:30. Earlier that day I'd checked. Delta had an 8:35 flight to Kansas City. "Wake me up before you leave. I want to kiss you goodbye." "I will, Katie." Frankie. "Andrea wants to go shopping for shoes before dinner. I suspect that will be an adventure." "I'm sure it will." Katie giggled and then she said, "Anyway, I'm going to meet her at the mall. We'll go out to dinner after we're done shopping. We probably won't end up having dinner until after stores close at 9 o'clock, so it may be 11 or even later before I finally get home." I silently sighed. It was obvious that my wife was planning a big night with her lover. Careful to mask the sadness I was feeling, I said, "Thanks for telling me. Since I have an early plane to catch in the morning, I won't wait up for you." "I think that's a good idea." "Frankie, I'll see you in the morning. Have a good time with Andrea tonight." There was a pause. Several seconds passed and then Katie said, "Thank you, Frankie. I will." She paused again. After a moment she added, "Frankie, I love you." "I really do." "I know that, Katie. I love you too." Frankie. "Yes, Katie. I really do plan to make Thursday night a very special night. I have a surprise that I know you're going to love. I'm looking forward to it." "Frankie, I'd better go." "Yes, you'd better. You wouldn't want to keep Andrea waiting." "Bye, Frankie." "Goodbye, Katie. Drive carefully tonight." "Frankie, I can't wait until you get home Thursday night. It's going to be so much fun." And then Katie ended the call. As I put my cell phone away, I sighed wistfully and whispered, "Sorry, Katie. Thursday night isn't going to happen." I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 6 o'clock. I realized that I was hungry. I'd just passed a beer joint called Eddie's Bar and Grill. A hand-painted sign in the window advertised juicy cheeseburgers. I made a quick U-turn and parked across the street. Eddie's was a dusty little dive with a wood floor, but the tap beer was ice cold. The cheeseburgers were big and juicy and the French fries were crispy and covered with seasoned salt. It turned out to be a magnificent meal. As I was finishing my second beer, my cell phone rang. It was Dana. "Hi, Frankie. I thought I'd call you with a quick update. Jeff Wheeler phoned me a little while ago. They wired your house this morning. They have surveillance cameras in the living room, den and both bedrooms. They also have microphones set up so they can hear everything that's said anywhere in the house." "Oh, and Frankie, you don't have to worry about being spied on tonight. Jeff assured me that nothing will be turned on until tomorrow afternoon. According to my dad's lawyers, he's very reliable, so I think you can trust his word on that." I laughed. "That's a relief. I'd hate to think that someone is filming me while I'm walking around my bedroom in my tidy whities tonight." Chuckling lasciviously, Dana said, "I think I'd be very interested in acquiring a copy of that video. Maybe I should call Jeff and see if he can turn the cameras on." "Dana, you're a pervert. Believe me, Frankie, you cannot imagine how right you are about that." Laughing again, I said, "When all of this is over and we're both legally separated, I think I'd like to find out." "Frankie, that's a date." That made me smile. There was a brief pause. I think both of us were imagining what that date might be like. I certainly was. Dana Munson was a beautiful woman. After a moment Dana said, "Frankie, Jeff told me that he also managed to bribe a maid at the King's Motor Inn. He has microphones set up in the room that Pete and Katie always use. Because the recording will be made in a motel without Pete and Katie's knowledge and consent, we won't be able to use it as evidence in the divorce hearings. Still, it should give us a little more insight into their affair. I'll be very interested to hear what Katie is saying to your husband." "I will too. Jeff said that he'd get me 2 copies of the recording right away in the morning. I'll call you as soon as I have them." "Thanks, Dana. I'd appreciate that." "Frankie, I'd better get back to work. I have some things to finish up before I can go home." "Thanks for the update, Dana." "Bye, Frankie." "Bye, Dana." After paying my check, I left the bar and walked across the street to my car. It was almost 7 o'clock. But it was midsummer. There were still 2 hours of daylight left. Fortified by Eddie's cuisine, I decided to take an after-dinner drive by the King's Motor Inn. I guess I was still grasping at a vain hope that Katie really was shopping for shoes with Andrea. It only took me a few minutes to get to the motel. Holding my breath in nervous anticipation, I followed the narrow driveway around to the back of the building. When I turned the corner and saw my wife's red Honda parked next to the black Lexus with the Law Dog license plate, my heart sank. I quickly sped away, crying to myself, "Why, Katie? Why? How many nights a week do you need to spend with that scumbag?" I drove to Jupiter Construction and took refuge inside my office. I tried to work, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept visualizing Katie in that motel room with Munson. For the next 2 hours a torrent of emotions roiled inside of me. Disappointment came first, but it quickly morphed into pain and agony. Pain and agony didn't last long. They immediately degenerated into despair. For a while I wallowed in despair, but despair is an emotion of the defeated. While I was hurt and I was angry, I was not defeated. I would never accept defeat from a low life like Pete Munson. Gradually I pulled myself together. My strength returned and banished the last remnants of despair from my heart. I remembered the plan. My resolve fortified, I locked my office and drove home. As soon as I arrived at home I poured myself a stiff scotch, and drank it while I packed a small carry-on bag. I wasn't actually going to Kansas City, but if I was going to convince Katie that I was, I needed to be carrying a bag when I left the house in the morning. While I was doing that I glanced around the bedroom. I couldn't see any signs of Jeff Wheeler's surveillance cameras. He was good at his job. After I finished packing I took a quick shower, poured myself another stiff scotch and sipped it while I watched the 10 o'clock news. After the news was over I went to bed. I was exhausted. Sleep came quickly. When I awoke in the morning Katie was lying next to me. It was 6:15. Silently slipping out of bed, I took a quick shower, shaved and dressed. Once I was ready to go I awakened Katie with a gentle kiss on her forehead. She stirred for a moment and then her eyes opened. When she saw me she smiled. "Hi Frankie. I didn't hear you get up. What time is it?" "It's 6:45. I have to leave for the airport." "Have you had breakfast?" "No. I'll get something at the airport." Katie slipped out from under the covers and stood up. "I'll walk you to the door." She grinned at me. "And when you do get home, I plan to feed you a steak dinner with all the trimmings, and then I'm going to take you into our room and rock your world." I stared at Katie. I wanted to ask her, "You rocked Pete Munson's world last night, and you plan to rock it again tonight. Why do I have to wait? Why does he get you first and more often? Why does he get you at all? Why am I playing second fiddle to him?" I didn't ask her any of those questions. I couldn't. I had to maintain my facade of ignorance. Instead I smiled at Katie and said, "I'm looking forward to it." She smiled back at me. "So am I." At that moment I realized that this was the most dishonest conversation that Katie and I had ever had. Trying to mask my anger and sadness, I picked up my overnight bag. As I started to leave our bedroom, Katie reached out and grasped my hand. I stopped. She looked at me. I saw the love in her eyes. It was unmistakable. I melted. "I wish you didn't have to go." I wanted to believe her. I so badly wanted to believe her. In a quiet voice, I answered, "Yes, I wish that too." She sighed. "But you do have to go." "Yes, I do." "Come on." Katie gave my hand a tug. We silently walked together through the living room and dining room and into the kitchen. When we reached the door to the garage, we stopped. Pulling me to her, Katie gently kissed my lips and whispered, "Frankie, I really do love you. Please never forget that." I believed her. Staring into her eyes, I said, "I love you" to Katie. And then I kissed her back.